This is unusual for a funeral to see so many young people here. It's really symbolic. As one soul leaves, others come. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. Praise thee, you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, righteous judge. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mavarach. The Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Praised be the name of the Lord. Talmud teaches, when a person is born, all rejoice. When a person dies, all cry. But it should not be so. For when a person is born, there is no knowing his fate and deeds. But when he dies, one ought to rejoice, for he is departing with a good name and going out of the world in peace. Yesh kochavim. There are stars up above. So far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Eli, Eli, Shelo Yegomer Leolam, Achol v'Hayam Rishrush Shel Hamayim, Barak HaShamayim Tefilat HaAdam, Achol v'Hayam Rishrush Shel Hamayim, Barak HaShamayim Tefilat HaAdam. My God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. It's okay, let them move around, it's fine. My friends, we are gathered here today not just to memorialize Robert Ney, but to celebrate his life, a life filled with love of family and love for a profession dedicated to helping all humanity. The Torah portion we read yesterday is called Lech Lecha. In it, our forefather Abraham was told to leave his city, his home, and some of his family, and travel to an unknown land where he would find a new home and where he would prosper. Robert Ney was forced to leave his home in Hungary, and just before he was to be pushed into a cattle car that was going to a concentration camp, he miraculously escaped. After World War II, he arrived in this country with no knowledge of our language, started a new family, became an engineer with the U.S. Department of Energy, wrote many patents, and prospered. Robert was a proud and loving father to Doug, Deborah, Eleanor, and Stephanie, and a stepson, Michael. He was also the beloved grandfather to 5 grandchildren. I have only touched upon the essence of who this man was, and I know there are others among us who would like to add some personal remembrances. And I think, Doug, you wanted to say a few words.
Don't mind if I pull this down? Oh, yeah. That was beautiful, Rabbi Shapiro. Thank you for coming, and thank all of you for coming. You know, it's times like this when you have tragedies that you realize how lucky you are. You know, you get introspective. And I'm lucky. I mean, he taught me well, and you know, he was a lucky guy himself, but I look at the people standing here and I'm lucky too. So thank you guys for coming. I also want to thank my wife for all that she's done to, you know, make this tough time a little better. says there's no family here, I'm like, well, Lance is like family, so I feel like I'm lucky to have a journey like this with you. You know, my childhood friend Michael came. We were brothers at our young age, and you know, it's sad now with Corona we haven't really gotten together, and it's sad that we're here together now for something like this, you know. And I look at kind of the life he had at the end, where they were quarantining everybody. I went by the nursing home over the past, you know, few days, and I see all these old people, and it makes me sad, you know. They're still alive, and they don't get to be around people that they love. And you know, I would sneak into the nursing home, break the rules of quarantine, but I think the nurses were kind of okay with it. After a while, they would say, oh, no, just don't tell anyone. You can go in. I felt like, sorry, I think I was a little quiet there. I feel like he was always like, don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I'm okay. He was a very simple guy. He didn't want much, you know, even up till now when we kind of was picking out his funeral packages, and never had to go through this, and I wasn't sure, you know, what I would pick, but I know my dad would want the cheapest package possible, and I was like, no, I'm gonna get him something nicer. And I talked to the funeral director, and she's like, no, the traditional pine box is traditionally, she's like, oh, you're not part of the faith. I'm like, well, I'm kind of part of the faith, but you're not familiar with it, but this is the traditional Jewish burial through the pine box. And you know, I feel like it, you know, it befits him. He was a simple guy. When he was a young boy, I mean, when I was little, he would tell me stories when I was young about how his life was much different than mine, growing up in Europe during the war. And you know, he'd make tell myself, just keep it together. You know, he'd tell you, you're lucky. You didn't have to scrounge for food or fear for your life. And he tells this great story. I always liked this one story because he was always so passionate about it. Was when the war was ending, he was in Budapest. They were all in Budapest. Not just the Jews, but all the citizens there were taken over by the Nazis. The Nazis were running the city, the country, and he said the Russians came and liberated the city. It wasn't the Americans. I always thought it was the Americans that liberated Europe, but you know, you forget there was other people fighting that war. And he said the Russians came and the Nazis ran. He said if it was the Americans coming, they wouldn't have ran. He said the Russians didn't take prisoners. So he said they fled the city, but what happened is they took all the resources with them. They took the food, and you know, so they starved for 2 weeks until they brought them food. And he's like, you know, the Russian people saved his life. And then he went on into, you know, the Hungarian culture. A lot of the Jews came over before the war, and it was some famous mathematicians and scientists. You know, it was like this national pride. Education there was prideful. So a lot of those scientists came here to help fight that war on the American side. And so, you know, after the war, he went and became an engineer, you know, to become, you know, a scientist of sorts, and went on to, you know, work for the Department of Energy and wrote these patents. But a lot of these patents were for nuclear triggers for bombs to fight the Russians. So it's funny how, you know, the people of Russia, you know, people themselves are probably no different than us. You know, they probably, you know, when you meet them head to head, they'll help you. But the politicians and the politics of it all is who fight these wars. And it's sad that we're all like separated now. The people can't get together. We're just being run by the politicians. Of course, it's a pandemic, but it's sad what's happening now. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't have to. I had like the best tutor ever. I mean, he would teach me everything I needed in math and science, and he was like Google before Google even happened. And when I was in college one time, I thought of this story last night. I had this project. You had to do a project in chemistry, and in chemistry they had this chemical compound. You had to figure out this compound, what it was. And I got to the end. It's like your whole chemistry lab class was to find out what this compound was. And I got to the end and I went to the book to find out, based upon the numbers, the radio, whatever that number you had to find, that periodic, that atomic weight. And I was like, oh, damn it, there's no number for what I went through all this lab stuff. I didn't have a number, so I'm like, I call my dad, I'm like, Dad, you know, what do I do? I don't have the number. He's like, well, do you have any more of that sample left? I was like, yeah. He goes, well, send me a piece. So he took it, he ran it through his mass spectrometer department there, and he's like, it's exactly this atomic weight, so whatever that is. So I went to the book, and there was too many numbers. I was like, Dad, they're gonna know I cheated. There's too many numbers. He's like, well, just cut some of the numbers up, you'll be fine. And so I submitted that and got an A. I feel like he was always like good with dad jokes. We'd go to McDonald's as kids, and I'd always be like, what do you want to drink? He'd be like, oh, you have any Old Milwaukee Light? And the ladies, I'm like, this, but you have to understand, every time. It was funny one time. He'd always order a beer at McDonald's. You know, it's funny, he lived so simple, he lived so long, I mean, 91, but I feel like, you know, when we think about death, we think of this, you know, you go down fighting and you're taking medications and surgeries or whatever, and he really went quite well. I mean, if you had to go, and he had some GI problems, so I took him to the hospital a week ago, and he was in the hospital, and the nurses were like, he's doing well, he's doing pretty good, he's actually in pretty good shape for 91, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I know, but what's the bleeding like? Oh, that's all cleared up, his heart's gone down a little bit, but you didn't expect him to go. I mean, like, oh, we're gonna go to the hospital, I'm gonna discharge him, he's good. And so it was shocking to get that call. But when I was in the hospital, I took him in on when the World Series was Game 1. So we sat and watched Game 1 of the World Series at the hospital, which was kind of nice with him because he didn't really like sports. I mean, we grew up playing chess. I mean, that was kind of the, you know, I'm like, growing up, I was like, man, all the other kids, their dads like out playing baseball with him. My dad was like, let me show you about this thing I'm building in the garage. And I'd be like, oh, you know, what's this? What's that? And he'd always be like, you know, can I help you do something? He'd, no. Cross your fingers. That's all I need you to do. Just help me by cross. But he's in the hospital, and he wrote all these patents, and I feel like it kept him going. And he had kind of something to live for besides us kids and grandkids. He was working on this project, this final patent. And I mean, you have to understand, my entire life I've heard about these patents, this project he's working on. You just kind of go, I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. You talk about the weather, and he'd be like, well, that's fine. Let me talk to you about this patent. You know what I mean? And it was sad at the end, you know, he's like, I got this final patent. I'm like, will you turn it in? If I don't make it, it's hidden. He hid it. He's afraid someone's going to steal his patent. He hid it in his room under a drawer. He's like, it's there. I want you to make sure you get it. Turn it in. So that's what I'll do. I'll turn it in for him. Listen. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Eventually we come to the final gates, the final closing. The trail ends, leaving behind only memories of steps taken, leaps tried, grace achieved and shared. How do we honor this final gate? With tears and stories, with memories and love, with food and friends, and with silence. Silence is the heart of death, and silence alone does it justice. But silence does not mean passivity, and our tradition speaks of 4 virtues that form the core of silence. The first is hearing the inner voice of our pain and love, rejoicing that nothing, not even the grave, can rob us of that supreme emotion. The second is memory, reclaiming the past by refusing to forget all the joys it once held. He who once lived among us now lives within us, and there he cannot die. The third is action. We must honor our dead by continuing to live ourselves. Their memory is quickened only in the fullness of our own lives, our own futures, our own ongoing struggles to make sense of an often senseless world. The fourth is wisdom. Every life is a teaching, every person a guide to truth. We must allow the wisdom that was Robert Ney to become part of ourselves, that his memory might lead us to an even greater wisdom of our own. Hearing, memory, action, wisdom. May each of these find a place in our silence, our grief, and our moving out again into the world where yet another gate beckons wide. Please rise if you are able. El Molei Rachamim, Shochein Bamramim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah, B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utahorim Kezoa Harakia Maschirim Et Nishmat Robert Ney, Shehalach Liolamo Began Eden Tehei Menuchato, Anna, Baal Harachamim Hastirehu, V'seiter Kanafecha Liolamim, Utzror B'tzror Hachayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar, Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Robert Ney, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
It is our custom to sprinkle some earth from the Holy Land onto the grave, signifying that this place is forever holy, and the soul of our beloved will always remain in that holy space. Don't get precarious. Take this and sprinkle it all over. You like things. Yeshov ha'afar al ha'aretz v'shehaya v'haruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher notata. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns unto God who gave it. You may be seated if you wish. The greatest gift of righteousness or charity is to do something for the departed because we do it out of love. There is no expectation of a thank you because the deceased cannot utter those words. And so it is our custom to fill in the grave, which we will now do symbolically. The family will start, and then anyone who wishes may follow. And we do it in a couple of steps. First, we use the back of the shovel to signify that we know we have to do this, but we really don't want to. And then we can use the front of the shovel, and you can throw in as many shovelfuls as you wish, and when you finish, put it back in the earth so that we don't pass death from one person to the other, and the next person will take it. We'll start with Doug, and if you wish, and then anyone else who wishes to do so.
your old pictures.
Yeah.
It's so funny to see like the photos
Oh, yeah.
of the old house.
Found a bunch of stuff from Aruba.
Yeah. I haven't delved that deep yet.
Oh boy, we had some wonderful fashion. You guys did.
And if you have some big pictures, Stephanie has a lot of pictures, and she doesn't give me anything.
I'll make copies. I'll get a digital. I got like packages. I got a thing for you, a thing for like us, you, Mark, and us guys. And take you.
Oh really?
Yeah, I'm gonna scan them and get them all to you
I
guys.
didn't have to scan it, just take photos. I just use my camera phone and just snap a picture.
I just did.
You are.
I just got them all scanned so everyone has
Yeah.
copies of this stuff.
Dana's mom is buried here. Just on the other side. So, and kind of put the light, you know. We can pull up here. And show this.
Once again, if everybody would come and take their places for us.
It's okay. When I've gone, if you need to weep, weep for someone walking in the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands and souls touch souls. You can love me most by sharing your dreams and multiplying your good deeds. You can love me most by letting me live in your eyes and not in your mind. And when you say Kaddish for me, remember what our Torah teaches. Love does not die. People do. So when all that is left of me is love, give me away. We come now to the final mourner's prayer. It's called the mourner's Kaddish. It has nothing to do with death. It is a great list of praises for God, signifying that even in our saddest moments, we are still able to glorify the Creator. If you know these words, I think they're on the back of your handouts. Please join the family and please rise if you're able. And we say together, Yiskadal v'yiskadash Shmei Rabbah, v'yolmad divrach Yerusei v'yamlich malchusei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beis Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach v'yolam u'mei olmaya, Yisbarach v'yishtabach, v'yispa'ar v'yisraman v'yisnasei, v'yishadav v'yisalev v'yisalal Shmei l'kudesha brichu, Le'ela min kol be'achasa v'shirasa, tush b'chasa v'nechemasa, da'miram bi'olmo v'yimru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim olenu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromov, hu ya'aseh shalom, olenu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yal kol Yoshvei Tevet v'yimru amen. B'yahado of Kidruchi, the Eitishan v'Oira, v'Yimruchi gaviyoti, Adonoli v'lo v'ira. Into your hands I entrust my spirit, when I sleep and when I wake, and with my spirit my body also. You are with me, I shall not fear. This concludes our service, and thank you all for coming.